Okay, thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Peterson. I'm a third-year law student at Penn State Law, and I'm also currently serving as the Associate Director of PERC. So as Peter already said, we'd like to go ahead and thank you all for joining us today for the third installment of our public health or Partners by Nature. And today, as you all know, the topic will be climate change and public health infrastructure, issues of emergency preparedness. So as I said, I'm the Assistant Director of PERC, so it seems right to explain a little about what PERC is. PERC is the Pennsylvania Environmental Resource Consortium. We are a consortium of over 50 Pennsylvania higher education campuses. Our mission statement is to share knowledge and take action towards enhancing sustainability, both on and off campus. We're involved in a variety of programs, namely on-campus sustainability programs. One of our recent initiatives is the Pennsylvania Higher Education Food Recovery Challenge. We also focus on off-campus community sustainability, student engagement in sustainability, and getting more sustainability in the curriculum. Additionally, we have a few government alliances. For example, we're working with Heidi Kunka at the DEP. So we have the DEP climate change interns, as well as the DCNR Thinking Outside initiative. We'd like to thank all of our member institutions. We're made possible by their dues and sponsorships. And if you'd like to learn more about us, check us out at pagreencolleges.org. Next slide. We'd also like to give just a quick special thank you to the coordinating committee. So both Peter Boger and Peter Buck from Penn State's Sustainability Institute, Lisa Davis from the Office of Rural Health, Rebecca Kishbaugh from the Department of Health, Ruth McDermott Levy from Villanova University, and myself. Be sure to be on the lookout. Our finalized schedule will be coming up soon of further colloquiums for this series in the fall, which will tentatively focus on public health and fracking, as well as public health and sustainability community advocacy. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. First, we'll be hearing from Heidi Kunka, an energy program specialist with Pennsylvania's Department of Environmental Protection, followed by Dr. Christian Martin Gill, Chief of EMS Division and Department of Emergency Medicine at the University of Pittsburgh, and lastly, Scott Buchle, Program Manager, Lifeline EMS in Penn State Milton S. Hershey Medical Center.
So Heidi, I think you're up.
All right, can you hear me? Great.
Yeah.
All right, just gonna share my presentation here. All right, so thanks for having me today. I am Heidi Kunka. I work for the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection in the Energy Programs Office. And my role there is all things climate change. Except RGGI, I'm not working on RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We do have other folks that are leading that at the department. So today I'm going to be touching briefly on what the state is doing in regards to climate action, our greenhouse gas inventory for the Commonwealth, climate impacts assessment and climate action plan, and then also touching on how we're supporting local governments in taking climate action and highlighting emergency preparedness along the way. So just so everyone understands DEP's roles and responsibilities in regards to climate change, we are the state agency tasked by Act 70 of 2008 to develop a climate impacts assessment once every 3 years, a climate action plan once every 3 years, an annual greenhouse gas inventory for the Commonwealth, and also we manage a climate action committee that meets bi-monthly. And that is a public meeting. We are doing all of those virtual, and those are public. The next one is August 25th. So most of you on the call today are probably familiar with some of these statistics here on this slide, so I'm not going to stay on it for long. This is from an older climate impacts assessment for the Commonwealth. We typically subcontract with Penn State University to do our climate impacts assessment. So things are going to get warmer, things are going to get wetter in the Commonwealth. I think we're all seeing that with the number of 90+ degree days that are getting to be the trend here in Pennsylvania. And when you see there that there's going to be a winter increase of 14% of precipitation, I got news for the skiers out there like myself, that's not going to be in the form of snow, unfortunately. Snow cover in the Commonwealth will go away much faster. We'll still get snow, but it's not going to stay on the ground, and we are going to get less of it. So our 2020 Pennsylvania Climate Impacts Assessment was just released earlier this year. And it was different from all of our climate impacts assessment before. It really honed in on 3 particular topics. The first of which is livestock. How is our livestock production going to change? And those livestock production impacts, what will they be on our water quality? So right now you have a lot of hog and poultry production going on in southeastern US states. It does require climate control to raise poultry specifically. And so what we may see is a northward movement of poultry to Pennsylvania. Because it's just going to be more and more expensive to do that down south as their temperatures get warmer, relatively speaking to us. They're obviously going to get warmer faster than us. So the expectation is that Pennsylvania's poultry inventory could more than double in size. So obviously that means nitrogen and phosphorus loads could increase. They're expecting that in almost all Pennsylvania counties. And these changes could exacerbate water quality concerns, especially in the Susquehanna and Delaware River basins. So bullet 2 there, the second topic, focused on the TMDLs, the total maximum daily loads to the Chesapeake Bay. We're going to see a decreased effectiveness of the best management practices to reduce nutrient loads in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which is the Susquehanna. And so adjustments to the BMPs, the best management practices, and the design and location are going to be needed to mitigate increased and more frequent runoff events into the Bay watershed. And finally, the resilience of our infrastructure to extreme weather. So flooding appears to have the greatest potential future impact on infrastructure in the Commonwealth. Flood-related damage will be localized, but large portions of multiple energy and transportation infrastructures are potentially susceptible to flood damage in the Commonwealth. Southwest PA faces additional risk from landslides, and they're already experiencing that from the steep slopes surrounding Pittsburgh. And the impacts of extreme weather on the infrastructure will vary widely across Pennsylvania, as does readiness for those impacts. And some of the counties facing the greatest impacts are also among the poorest. And I can show you that here. Here's a little snippet from our 2020 Climate Impacts Assessment, which you can see on our DEP climate webpage if you're interested in reading further. But as you can see, you got Luzerne County at the top up in northeast PA due to the Susquehanna River. So you see Dauphin County on there due to the Susquehanna. I call her the mighty Susquehanna for a reason. She starts all the way up in Cooperstown, New York, and flows all the way to the Chesapeake Bay, home of our nation's greatest estuary. So she is a behemoth. I do love the Susquehanna, kayaking on her. But next slide. So you can't manage what you don't measure. We hear that in the building industry frequently, but it goes, the saying goes also with climate action. So here is the most recent data that we have, 2017, for our greenhouse gas emissions in the Commonwealth. And so 66% of our greenhouse gas emissions in the Commonwealth come from fuel consumption. So, you know, obviously you see here that industrial makes up the largest chunk, followed by electricity production and then transportation. But if you add up all the fuel consumption sectors, of which are residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation, that's 66% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So energy consumption is actually our largest chunk of the pie here. So we definitely want to figure out ways to reduce our fuel and energy use in the Commonwealth. Here is a photo of the cover of our Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan from 2018. We are currently working on our 2021 Climate Action Plan. We actually have a call later today with our consultant for that report. It's ICF. Once again, ICF also wrote our 2018 Climate Action Plan under our supervision. So that plan is due out next fall, the 2021. Last year, when this plan came out last year, it focused on mitigation heavily. There was some adaptation in it. I have that highlighted here because I know that is the focus of this group, emergency preparedness and adaptation. There was some focus on adaptation. It wasn't that strong. There are going to be major improvements to the 2021 CAP, and you will see adaptation focused on more heavily. We are required by the statute, by the Climate Change Act, to focus heavily on mitigation. And this is also available on our climate change webpage. I invite you to take a look. We also have a Cliff Notes version, which is a more easily readable version as well. So here are the targets for our greenhouse gas reductions in the Commonwealth. They are in line with the Paris Accord. So 26% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2025 from our 2005 levels, and then 80% reduction by 2050. So the 2018 Climate Action Plan is divided into 8 sectors, which you'll see on the next slide. Those sectors are broken down into 19 strategies, of which then are broken down into 100 leadership actions. And we had our consultant quantitatively analyze via computer modeling 15 of those actions for economic and environmental benefits. And then all throughout the report, there are blue and turquoise boxes to call out actions specifically for citizens and businesses to take. So here are the sectors that are focused on in the 2018 Climate Action Plan. The top 3 sectors there that you see, the energy consumption, energy production, and agriculture, are the only sectors that had actions that were quantitatively analyzed. But for the purposes of this group, human health, that sector actually has 2 actions that I'm gonna call out here today because they're focused on emergency preparedness. So here you'll see all of the 19 strategies. It's no secret: energy efficiency, sustainable mass transit, renewable energy, all of that you see coming through here. Agricultural best management practices like no-till farming. But over on the right, I have highlighted 2 of the strategies that would definitely be of interest to this group. And I want to touch on those here. So like I mentioned earlier, the Climate Action Plan calls out some actions for businesses and citizens to take. But since we're all leaders on this call today, I've just included some of the leadership actions for this particular strategy of improving the reliability of public health info. So we're actually doing the first bullet right now, here today. We have government officials from DEP and Pennsylvania Department of Health on this call. academia, and healthcare institutions. And we're all trying to collaborate and brainstorm on best approaches here. We need to help local health departments assess their capacity to respond to health threats and integrate preparedness into their hazard response plans. Also, new surveillance databases to increase data quality, especially for climate-sensitive morbidity. I know the state of Maryland next door has done great work on climate-sensitive morbidity in the state, and they've studied the distribution of it in low-income communities and minority populations. And they've had some really interesting findings down there. They've partnered with the University of Maryland on that work very nicely. So again, bringing up the vulnerable populations there, again, on the last bullet about mapping out those vulnerable populations and using that to do your outreach. And the other strategy from the Climate Action Plan that focuses on emergency preparedness is to bolster our emergency preparedness. So to review existing emergency response plans to ensure that extreme weather events are going to be addressed, and to evaluate the adequacy and accuracy of our forecasting and early warning systems, and also to establish heat advisories and increase the availability of cooling stations in our communities. That's actually a great tool, especially for vulnerable populations, low-income communities that might not have air conditioning in their homes. So when you have another Superstorm Sandy roll through, you know, if that would happen in the summertime, we need air conditioning. These residents need air conditioning. So to be able to go to a community center that could provide that cooling for them is ideal, and to have some renewable energy backup at that facility so it will always stay powered. So another ways that we're supporting local governments in the Commonwealth in taking climate action, one is to assure energy in extreme weather events. So we actually partner with other state agencies to prepare for, monitor, and respond to energy assurance concerns. And specifically, the Energy Programs Office at DEP is responsible for liquid fuel energy emergencies, meaning propane and petroleum, ensuring that petroleum and propane are still being distributed in the Commonwealth, even in times of extreme weather events. So last year, our office contracted with ICF to assist counties in developing energy assurance emergency planning template. This template was shared with all the counties that took the training, and the template includes a listing of emergency responders and critical facilities that require fuel during emergencies, as well as an energy emergency checklist for the counties to go through. And then that template and other resources were provided to the counties at in-person trainings. So those materials are online on the webpage that you see there. And in this next program year, which actually started on July 1st, we are going to be doing the same program for municipalities, healthcare facilities, and K-12 schools. So training specifically for those entities. And that project is currently out to bid. So the training is not yet available. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on a program that I've been heading up at the Commonwealth. It's our local climate action program. So we this past year and also this next year as well, we are teaming up with ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, to match college students across the Commonwealth with 20 local governments. And the student local government teams are trained via online webinars and some one-on-one technical assistance from ICLEI on how to develop greenhouse gas inventories, as well as a climate action plan. So we had 20 participants this past year. and hope to have 20 more in the new year. I'm currently recruiting local governments. I hope to lock in all 20 this week. If you know of a local government who would be interested in this program, please have them reach out to me as soon as possible. We're hoping to have our first training webinar for the local governments August 10th to 12th, somewhere in that range. So this is just to show you how this program is modeled. It is a great partnership model. Funds come from the federal government, U.S. Department of Energy, to DEP. We use that to pay our grantee, ICLEI, to train the student local government teams. And just so you can see, I know one of the questions submitted in advance of this webinar today was which communities are well prepared. So I wanted to show you who was forward thinking here in the Commonwealth and who has participated in our program this past year. 12 draft climate action plans were completed. 8 of the communities, actually 2 of them went above and beyond, and they're taking the process, they're doing extra community engagement, which is awesome. So that's why 2 of them didn't finish, because they're going to take it till the end of the year and make sure they really take their time with this and do it right. So that's very admirable. And then as far as this next program year, I'm proud to announce these cities will be participating: Lancaster, Allentown, and our state capital. Also the city of Meadville up in Northwest PA. I miss putting them on here. Cumberland County. Montgomery County Consortium of Communities represents 48 municipalities in Southeast PA. And then Connect, the Congress of Neighboring Communities, represents 38 municipalities surrounding Pittsburgh. So I'm really excited for this next program year. And and just to mention, during the climate action planning cohort in the spring semester, the students in local governments actually do a vulnerability assessment, which tells them what their climate hazards are for their jurisdiction. And then the actions in their climate action plan should be addressing those vulnerabilities and climate hazards. So since we're talking about emergency preparedness today, I did want to mention that that's part of the LCAP program. And there's my contact information. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Heidi. I believe we have Dr. Christian Martin Gill up next.
All right. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to everybody. Chris Martin-Gill, I'm going to share with you first just a reality that I am not a climate scientist. I'm not a climate expert. And of course, that's different from most of the folks here on this call. So I don't pretend to be able to speak too much on the changes. And I appreciate Heidi Kunka kind of describing these impacts that Pennsylvania is seeing and that we can foresee seeing in the near future, as well as has been highlighted in some of the other sessions for this webinar series. What I do is work in EMS and in emergency medicine. I work at a level 1 trauma center as an emergency physician, and I spend actually most of my time working to oversee EMS systems in Western Pennsylvania and about 4 other states. We have 18 helicopter bases across 5 states. We have medical oversight of about 100 EMS agencies, fire departments, first responder services. In our neck of the woods is, I'm based here in Pittsburgh, and we oversee EMS agencies mostly in the EMS region, EMS West region of our Pennsylvania EMS system. So that's kind of the neck of the woods where I work and we see things. And that's relevant as I'll discuss a little bit about the data that I'm going to share with you and some of the impacts that we've seen on climate on emergency response. Some of it is probably intuitive. If you think about the types of emergencies we may see on hot days, cold days, you can imagine a blistering hot day, some of these 90-degree days that we've been experiencing. You're going to see people with heat stroke or other heat-related emergencies, or even the simple fact that folks are outside more when there's good weather. They're going to be, unfortunately, victims of trauma much more often in the summertime than we would experience in the wintertime. ATV accidents, folks being out doing fun things, but some specifically related to weather. And certainly the opposite is true. So big weather events. This is the Snowmageddon that happened to us in 2010. And really on an average day with a lot of ice and snow, we're going to anticipate we're going to see folks with slip and falls. We're going to see hip fractures happen. We're going to see folks exposed to cold weather and come in with frostbite and other things. So you can see very directly how certain weather events or extremes of weather can directly impact patients and the types of emergencies that we may see. And not just that, but the impact that we would see for our emergency response during this event in 2010, where in Pittsburgh we had 2 feet of snow just overnight. Other parts of Pennsylvania clearly even more impacted. For us, it was difficult to get around in ambulances because, in fact, our snowplows spent most of their time over the first 72 hours getting ambulances unstuck from snow, which did not help the cause of getting the snow off of the roadways. And so the ability to respond to EMS calls was very significantly impacted, and it was difficult to get around to help folks. Another way to think about it is actually, for me, thinking back about 20 years ago when my chair of emergency medicine at the University of Virginia, which was where I went to school, used to talk about what it was to go into emergency medicine and mentioned that as he drove into work each day, just looking at what the weather was like outside, he could almost predict some of the things that he was going to see that day, taking care of patients in an emergency department. And I think that's probably even more true today than it was that time ago in terms of what we see. When I think about extremes of weather, I think about specific events, specifically mass gathering events. So, you know, save for the era of COVID, you know, the Pittsburgh Marathon is one of those large mass gathering events that we experience in Pittsburgh, where over the course of a weekend, more than 20,000 runners will participate in a variety of events. Specifically on the Sunday, they're usually the first Sunday in May, we tend to have somewhere over 16,000 runners participating in either a half marathon or main marathon event, all running at the same time. Just in calculations, we are in planning, we have a lot of preparations for emergency care. We have aid stations with ambulances staffed every mile to mile and a half all along the marathon course. We have a large tent, really a field hospital at the finish line with about 60 beds available and a couple dozen physicians and a whole lot of other staff. We expect to see between 1% and 3% of participants as patients. And I'll tell you that we are very cognizant of what the weather is, and we wish that the weather could be predicted farther ahead of time than it can be, because I know that a 5 to 10 degree fluctuation in weather at the wrong hour of the day will be the difference between seeing 1% or 3% or more of those tens of thousands of runners as patients that day. The blistering sun in downtown Pittsburgh, where everybody comes running, creates an oven effect between the mirrored buildings and the asphalt, where the temperature on the ground becomes even 10 to 15 degrees hotter than the ambient temperature may be on other parts of the race course. And so we can see how even smaller fluctuations in weather or other climate factors like the sun can have a significant impact on we end up seeing in terms of collapse, syncope, folks passing out, and other events that are quite impactful to those folks. But what was interesting for me actually in the last webinar in this series, hearing from one of the climate scientists that was mentioning things, was the impact that just a 1 degree change can have when we look at those numbers, you know, from over the course of a year. You know, on average, we'll see a 1 degree change. And again, Heidi Kunka mentioned some of these degree change, 5 degrees higher in Pennsylvania. I think it was 2050. And so what was striking to me was the impact that has on significant weather events. So whether it's very high temperature days or storms that may happen, or significant cold weather events, those fluctuations are compounded by some of these degree temperatures. So for us to think about an emergency response to how often we're going to have to respond to these significant weather events, it seems just evident that we're going to have more of those. And so, I could keep sharing those anecdotes in terms of days where the weather really impacted what we saw in the field. But what was of interest for me and part of my team is, what is the actual change for emergency response just on day-to-day weather effects? Because it's one thing to have to plan for the marathon on an annual basis, or think about some of these blistering hot or really cold days and what that will mean to our ability to take care of 911 emergencies. But how does weather really impact my day-to-day response and preparedness and emergency response of the number of ambulances that I have out on the street, and the other ways that we respond to anticipate the needs? So we had this question, and in fact, we published a paper in Pre-Hospital Emergency Care not that long ago, about a year and a half ago, where my colleagues and I looked at some weather factors and temporal factors and their association with emergency care, so EMS responses, so this is 911 calls, on a day-to-day basis. And what we did was we looked at our neck of the woods, 6 counties in Western Pennsylvania. We looked at a little bit over 500,000 EMS calls that happened between 2014 and 17. These were 24 urban, suburban, and rural EMS agencies, so a good kind of broad look at different counties and different parts of Pennsylvania. And we looked at NOAA records out of Pitt Airport, which was central to our catchment area. And our key issue, or key question for us was, could we identify weather factors, climatological factors that impacted EMS response volume? And then separate questions that I won't get into too much is, what does that mean for actual transports to the hospital, for specific cases of trauma, and then for pediatric patients? I won't get into the secondary things out of time constraints, but I will mention that we really found the exact same things as in the main analysis. And what those findings were really remarkable in that we found that specific weather factors like temperature, precipitation, even the wind, could identify changes in the number of 911 EMS responses that we see on a day-to-day basis. And even when you split things out by season, you can say that temperature, even during the winter, was also associated with number of 911 responses. Now that is probably because if the weather is nice in December, people are going to be out more, they're going to be more active, you may be seeing more trauma cases of things happening. But those things held out even when adjusting for the seasons. And this was an adjusted analysis looking at not just this, but other temporal factors that could potentially have been co-associated with these factors. It was very interesting to see, even begin to have the questions about, could we predict the EMS response volume that we may see based on specific weather events? And then we said, well, is this just limited to Western Pennsylvania? Is this something that happens elsewhere? Is there something unique about, us that is different from others? So we try to answer that question. And in fact, we did. We looked at publicly available EMS records from San Francisco. Anybody that's visited the Bay Area knows that they have really just weird weather, right? In fact, my brother lives in San Francisco, and it's like, I think the summerest day of the year is in October. And they really have kind of a lot of weather fluctuations. So it's an interesting place to kind of explore weather effects. Marin County, which is a little bit further up, is a beachier part of California. New York City, so we're now talking East Coast and those weather effects. And then Cincinnati, Ohio, looking at a Midwest city. And these are important not just from differences in weather and the fact that they're across the United States, but also because their EMS services are quite different. And have a wide range of not just how emergency services are delivered, but the way that their EMS systems are structured. So it was interesting for us to think about, how does this apply across other parts of the country? We looked at over 7 million cases of 911 EMS scene dispatches over the course of about 5 years. Again, looking at NOAA data for weather. And what we found is that you could almost transpose it. In fact, I have there as the blue dot, what we saw in Western Pennsylvania. And so what we identified was these same weather-related patterns on increased incidence of 911 response applied across all of these different EMS systems in really almost the exact same way of how temperature impacts the volume of 911 responses, different changes that happen when controlling for seasons, when you look at precipitation, and again, I don't know why, but even wind effects how that impacts the number of responses. And that, I think, was interesting and remarkable. And when you sum up all of these models and you put them together, you just see just a cleaner representation of those data. And so the last thing that we've been trying to do with this is to say, okay, clearly there's a relationship there. It's not just in Pennsylvania, it's across the United States. I'm sure if we looked at world data, had that available, we would probably see similar patterns. But now we're trying to think about, can we actually predict the number of EMS responses that we have based on anticipated weather events? And this is actually what my team and I are working on right now. We're actually quite literally doing the final analysis and writing up our results for use of a meta learner, which this is, if folks know the buzzwords, machine learning. So this is basically throwing a whole bunch of data into a variety of algorithms that may help to predict an outcome. And the outcome for us is EMS response volume, in trying to look at what we can predict. We're actually looking at this point for this analysis, a larger swath of New York City data, over 7 million dispatches over the course of those years. And we're evaluating several machine learning algorithms. I don't have all of the data ready to present to you because literally this is up to the minute research that we're doing right now, but I can share with you that our preliminary look at our data shows that with machine learning algorithms, we can actually predict with fair certainty some of the impacts that weather events and even day-to-day weather factors are going to have on EMS response volume. And this may have a significant impact on how we staff different areas based on what we anticipate we're going to see out there on a day-to-day basis, telling us that we need to put an extra truck out on the street or that we may have a lower volume type of day based on what we're seeing out there. And that could be a very interesting way that we combine weather and climatological science with emergency response and preparedness. And that's important for us in the world of emergency preparedness, because whether we need another truck out on the street, we need a boat out on the river, we need another helicopter ready to respond to certain events in certain regions, that's important and impactful. In this area of resource utilization, we need improved ways to identify that. And it looks that getting us together, climate scientists with emergency responders, is going to be one way that we're able to adjust to the growing needs of our community in the future. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And last up, we have Scott.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to pull up, there we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. All right. So my name is Scott Buchle. I'm the program manager for Lifeline Emergency Medical Services, which is based out of the Milton Hershey Medical Center. We are part of the Penn State Health System. Hershey Medical Center is our parent entity, and if you look at the Penn State Health System as a whole, it also includes St. Joseph's Medical Center in Reading, and we're also building 2 new hospitals, one, the Hampton Medical Center in Cumberland County, and also the Lancaster Medical Center in Lancaster County as well. The Lifeline program supports the entire health system. Again, like I said, our parent home is the Milton Hershey Medical Center, which is a level 1 adult and pediatric trauma center, an academic medical center. It's also one of the medical school for the Penn State University. I am a Penn State alum as well, so a lot of pride there. Our EMS program, we have 3 aeromedical helicopters, and we also have ground EMS services spread across 3 counties, Dauphin, Lebanon, and Cumberland County. And we service those municipalities, about 26 total, and we have about 26,000 calls a year for both emergency and non-emergency calls. When you look at the challenges faced by first responders, and I'm just going to, Dr. Martingill and I have a very, very similar presentation here. So I'm going to kind of give you the down and dirty perspective for the first responders in the street. You know, there's a saying that I learned a long time ago, and that is basically, we don't make the policy or interpret the science. Our job is to respond no matter what. You know, one of the things about emergency service responders is police, fire, and EMS, you give us any problem and we will fix it. It will not be pretty. It will not necessarily be by the book, but that's kind of the can-do attitude for first responders, is we'll fix anything. These are not easy times, and obviously the climate is affecting all of us. You know, when you look at the natural disasters and the frequencies of the natural disasters is going up, the cost of the natural disasters, the size of the natural disaster is increasing. You know, this is all, we're having to face these new challenges, you know, along with our decreasing budgets and revenues, the ongoing opioid epidemic. Our 911 system seems to be more heavily burdened than ever with facing an aging population and just, you know, increasing demands for our services, both police, fire, and EMS. You know, when you look at the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a lot of our first responders, especially in the fire service, are volunteer, and those numbers are kind of the smallest they've ever been. And they're shrinking every day. The number of EMS agencies is also shrinking, and a lot of the larger health system are starting to kind of fill those voids where need be, because a lot of the small volunteer EMS agencies, they just can't survive anymore because of the cutbacks in revenue and the challenges they face with managed care programs and you know, CMS regulations, and again, just the decreasing number of personnel. And then you add into that a global pandemic. The COVID-19 crisis has really made us reinvent ourselves the past 6 months or so. And it's really put a new face on what first responders have to do. So, you know, every emergency service has to look at the local impact that we're facing, and global, you know, the global effects of climate change is also adding to that crisis as well. When you look at the challenges, you know, there's many that are out there. I mean, the biggest thing is the severity of the climate events. You know, the frequency of big disasters is low, but it is increasing. The intensity seems to be high and getting worse. You know, we see more hurricanes. And, you know, when I was a kid, I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and I lived in central Pennsylvania my whole life. But when you look at tornadoes, when I was a kid, tornadoes was something never heard of in central Pennsylvania, the Harrisburg metropolitan area. Now in the summertime, it's not uncommon to have tornado threats and alerts and actual, you know, smaller tornadoes touch down. When you look at the adequate resources, you know, that are needed to respond to these events, the personnel and equipment for a particular disaster, there's some extenuating circumstances there that we're facing. It also takes time to deploy these resources. It takes time to, you know, and sometimes deploy county, state, and federal resources. One thing about emergency services that people need to understand is your local emergency services are pretty much built for the size of your community for an average number of calls. So if you have a small town of, let's say, a population, maybe, you know, 5,000 people, just drawing some very simple numbers, you might have an average of 10 police calls a day, 8 EMS calls a day, and maybe 1 fire call a day. And that's pretty much the average of what your first responders are built around. And with that, you have mutual aid that goes into that. So obviously, if there's more calls, mutual aid from surrounding counties is called upon. When you look at a disaster, one of the things that affects these communities and all the communities, and we see this all across the country, is the first responder system is so overwhelmed, we can't get to everybody. So if you have that same town of 5,000 people, and now 3,000 of those people need to call 911, there are not enough resources to go around. Okay, so the other challenge too is just triaging the type of calls. You know, some people also, they don't understand that, you know, we may get to you, you may be a lower priority. We will get to you when we get to you. The other thing too is you know, as the numbers have decreased, we see a lack of trained personnel. That's a struggle that some of the smaller responder agencies and some of the smaller towns across the Commonwealth are facing. They're having to rely on specialized units. So, you know, here in the metropolitan Harrisburg area, the Harrisburg City Fire Department is part of the Pennsylvania Task Force 1. So if a tornado would go through and cause, you know, a large swath of damage, that's going to quickly overwhelm the local first responders. So that Task Force 1 element would be deployed. And for us, again, you know, Harrisburg would be the closest contingency, and then would be supported by the other contingencies from around the state, Philly, Pittsburgh, Allentown, and so forth. You know, the community expectations, I kind of briefly touched on this already. You know, when you call 911, we have the expectation now that somebody will come. If the system is so overwhelmed, and we see this in large disasters, you know, Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Katrina, you know, first of all, the 911 system may be down, it may be shattered. There may not be anyone to come for hours or days. So that's why one of the things that I like to teach, and our organization tries to teach to the community, is self-resiliency. And basically take care of yourself for the first 72 hours or longer. You know, the community has an expectation when they call 911 speed. We are going to come quickly. We may be impacted by a natural disaster. You see a picture here of a tree and wires down. If you live up that road and you're having a medical emergency, we're not going to get to you very quickly. We see that in all kinds of disasters, you know, after storms, snow, flash flood, you know, so that expectation we're not able to live up to. You know, the climate impact on first responders, you know, the infrastructure we talked about, that might be damaged, roads, communication networks, cellular networks. You know, one of the things that we learned is we rely heavily on GPS. Well, what if a tornado goes through and completely wipes out the area? That GPS may not be reliable because of the cellular structure that's down. So we lose our hotspots, and now all your landmarks are destroyed. So it's very difficult to find where you're going during that disaster. You know, the 911 systems have redundancies built into them, but they could be down. Phone lines could be down. You know, the other thing too is with a lack of power and fuel, our capability of sustained operations is impacted as well. We work off of portable radios, and those radios have batteries. If we're on a prolonged incident where without power, those batteries are going to need to be recharged. So we have to have contingencies for that. You know, and then the recovery phase too, you know, it's not just rebuilding the first responder network. I mean, what if a disaster happens in your local town and your firehouse is wiped out, and now that ability to respond is impacted for days and weeks and maybe even months to come. Also, the first responder personal impacts. You know, if you look at a large scale disaster, the people who are out rescuing and saving and helping others, they also have their loved ones and their property and lives that have been completely affected by or uprooted by the disaster. You know, the types of common events that we see within central Pennsylvania, I'm going to briefly touch on wildfire. Now, fortunately, we don't see the type of wildfires that we do out in, you know, the West, but obviously floods, flash floods, tornadoes. We see the after effects of hurricanes. Snow is nothing uncommon to those of us in Pennsylvania. I think, though, that you know, we go a year or two or three without any snow, and then we get a ton of snow, which makes up for it. And obviously, right now we're kind of living through a heat wave, so that seems to be ever increasing as well. You know, again, we're fortunate we don't see big wildfires like they have out west, but just to give you an idea of the impact in total acres burned, you know, and this is some information from the Department of Commerce. This just shows you the increasing trend in the acreage that's been burned. Now, some of these are large scale wildfires across multiple states, the stuff that makes the 6:30 news, the world news at night. But what we don't really hear about is all the smaller wildfires that are occurring during that time frame as well. Also, the cost to fight these wildfires, as you can see, has dramatically increased as the years have gone on as well. The cost is you know, substantially going up, and that's everything from the loss of life down to the loss of the smallest piece of property, the cost to fight the fire, and you know, the rebuilding efforts that happen afterwards. You know, again, wildfires, you know, one of the things to look at here is you can just see, again, this is, in the sake of time, I'm going to kind of briefly go over this, but the cost is obviously going up. You know, when the U.S. Forest Service does their budgeting, they're kind of seeing now that the budget is ahead of you know, where, you know, the fires are. The fires cost more than what they had planned budget-wise. So if they're planning a budget for 2025, it may cost this. Now they're seeing that fire cost may actually be this year. You know, here in Pennsylvania, one thing, you know, from 2000 to 2009, the average of 4,300 acres burned annually in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And that's attributed to longer, hotter summers, shorter winters without adequate snowfall, the climate's drier, and also longer persisting droughts. Flash floods, this is the big thing that we see more frequently, I think, lately, especially in the summertime. These are all Pennsylvania pictures. This one picture in the corner, upper left corner, is Interstate 283 in Lancaster County from a couple months ago, a flash flood that we had. The after effects of Hurricane Lee in Harrisburg City along the Susquehanna River that overflowed. And also we see extreme flooding. I'm not exactly sure which hurricane or storm after effect that was, but we see Pittsburgh inundated with a lot of flooding there as well. These are actually pictures, Milton S. Hershey Medical Center, obviously here in Hershey, Pennsylvania. These are pictures from Hurricane Lee that affected us afterwards. And we were expecting heavy rain, but we weren't expecting the deluge of rain that came in a short amount of time. The iconic Hershey Park was open during this time. It was flooded. The flash flooding came up pretty rapidly and affected the park while the park was full of patrons. So they had to evacuate their patrons to safe areas and enact their plans. And again, that just had a total impact. One of the things that we saw during Hurricane Lee, the Milton S. Hershey Medical Center for a brief time, a couple hours, was actually an island surrounded by water. It was very difficult to get in and out of the hospital. There's one case I can tell you where there was a person who was being brought in by neighboring EMS that was having a heart attack that they were completely blocked from getting in. So we actually used our helicopter to fly a very, very short distance, pick up that patient and lift them over the waters into the med center so they could get treated. If not, they would have been waiting for a long time until a boat would have come. And then you have the risk of transferring the person in a boat. One of the things about flooding, the big thing we want to talk about here is just turn around, don't drown. We see emergency responders are affected pretty frequently because people drive through the water. They underestimate, even small, short amounts of water, that may not be that deep, 6 inches to a foot are moving quickly enough that they can knock you off your feet. So when you drive through moving water like this, the water has enough power that it can actually sweep the vehicle down the street and really, cause death and injury. Plus also, it also puts the first responders in an increasing dangerous point to respond. Tornadoes, we're seeing the increase in tornado outbreaks across the Commonwealth. Again, locally to us here in Hershey, July 14 of 2004, there was an EF3 tornado that came through Campbelltown, which is actually where I live. This development, which you see destroyed, I actually live in the development next to it. Fortunately, we have had no significant tornadoes like this recently, but it really drove home the message. And again, when I was growing up, this is something that you would see on the news that happened out in the Midwest. We never thought that this would happen in Pennsylvania. And sure enough, this has come home. One thing I want to talk about is if you look at the Joplin, Missouri tornado that happened May 22nd of 2011, it was an EF5. It greatly impacted that town, a town of 50,000 people, winds of in excess of 200 miles per hour sustained. Covered 6 miles. It lasted approximately 10 minutes. That's 10 minutes on the ground to do a lot of damage. 157 people died, over 1,000 people were injured. Joplin, Missouri has 2 hospitals. They have St. John's Mercy Hospital, which you can see the bottom picture was pretty much destroyed during this tornado, along with the Freeman Hospital, which was moderately damaged, but had to then compensate for all these injuries. When you look at the impact or the loss of a hospital from a city of 50,000 people, that is huge. The infrastructure was destroyed. They were unable to use their basic medical equipment. X-ray machines were down because there was no power. Equipment was damaged. Something else that was interesting about this is hospital charting was destroyed. Their medical records department was completely destroyed, and they still had a lot of records that were paper files that were strewn all across the city that were picked up in those winds and dropped down everywhere. Communication systems were overwhelmed, and the long impact on the healthcare system as they did their recovery. They did not recover from this for many months to even in some cases they weren't fully operational again for a few years after that. This is nothing new to us in Pennsylvania. Like Dr. Martin Gill had indicated, we have similar problems when it snows like this getting around, here in the Harrisburg area. The picture you see at the bottom is the Interstate 78 crash that we had in Lebanon County about 2 years ago. We are seeing more and more of these blinding squalls just pop up, and then suddenly it's a mass casualty incident. So this is something that we're having to train for and pre-plan as well. Ice storms, the impact of severe temperatures. The picture at the bottom of the firefighter covered in ice. When I was a young fireman, I thought that was pretty cool. It's a very iconic photo. Until one day, I actually had the opportunity to fight a fire like that and was covered in that type of ice. And I can tell you, it is literally cool, but it's not as cool in the sense that it's fun to be at. We're having to face more and more of these bitter cold snaps, these Arctic plunges, these ice storms, and it's really impacting our abilities. Heat, we're going through the heat now. You see, firefighting efforts, EMS efforts in this type of weather are impacted. The elderly is something that in EMS we're seeing big impacts on. These cooling centers that we're opening up, they're a great thing, but in the days of COVID, now we have to rethink those. How do you social distance when you have to open up a cooling center? When you have to evacuate a nursing home because their air conditioning went out? How do you maintain social distancing? If you're going to put these people somewhere temporarily, these are all new challenges that we're facing and we're having to deal with. You look at the size of the scope. This is Hurricane Katrina. This is what I was talking to earlier is, when you call 911, you expect someone will respond. This is a situation where you call 911, nobody may respond because there's no ability to respond, or we're not going to get to you for days. And we all know those iconic photos from Hurricane Katrina and how help was delayed getting there. So one of the things that, again, we really talk about, this is also aftermath of one of the hurricanes down south. How do you respond during that time? How do you get around? So one of the things we talk about is personal preparedness. They say that you should have a plan and you should prepare for a minimum of 72 hours. I feel a full week or longer is strongly recommended. Things you need to consider: food, shelter, and water. And don't forget, preparation items. It's a funny story is when 3 Mile Island happened, my family evacuated. I was a small kid, and I remember being put in the back of the station wagon as we were leaving the area with a bunch of canned goods, and we went to my aunt's house far away. But it was interesting because we joked about it afterwards, as my grandmother had cleaned out all the canned goods from the house, but we had no way of opening them. So, if you're going to have your food and shelter, and your water, make sure that you have the ability to prepare it, clean the water, and, if you have, if you're going to set up some temporary shelter, make sure you have the means to do that. First aid medications, along with any personal hygiene needs that you would need to sustain you for a couple days. Medications is an important thing as well. Clothes and shoes for the weather at hand. One of the things that people that when a tornado goes through the town, they don't realize is that, there's a lot of damage outside, and they go outside and while they were barricading themselves up in their basement, they forgot to put their shoes on. Now they got to go outside and there's nails and debris. So you see a lot of small injuries after that. Have your evacuation plans made. Don't wait. If you're given the order, get out of town. And also make sure your supplies are mobile. Gather and safeguard important papers. That's an important thing for the recovery process. Everybody should have their important papers in some type of portable box, safe box that's fire and waterproof that you can grab and go pretty quickly. Also, it's good to put this stuff on the cloud so you can recover it later. Have a meeting place for your family and all your family members. Practice this plan as well. I'm a couple typos there. I apologize. I threw this together at the last minute. Communications, that's supposed to say ways to keep your batteries charged, your cell phones and so forth. Something to pass the time. You may have downtime for a while. So while the power's out. So what are you going to do in that downtime? Don't forget your pets. We also see the iconic images of pets that are left behind after these disasters. And also practice your plan. Make sure you and your family and your loved ones are well aware of how the plan works. And this, trying to go through that to save time, that's all I have. There's my contact information if anybody would have any questions. And as a Penn State alum, we are, for all of you out there. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Scott. This is Lisa Davis from the Office of Rural Health, and I want to thank all of our presenters. We do not have time for questions and answers, but I did not see any questions posted to the chat box or to the question and answer section. So I know that some of you had submitted questions ahead of time. If we did not answer those questions, we will get that information out to everyone. I so want to thank all of our presenters. This was a fantastic session, and I learned a great deal. Even though I work in healthcare, I learned an awful lot. So great information for all of us. And just to let you all know, we will be sending out a survey after the webinar, and I hope that you will take just a few minutes to fill that out. We really do review everything that is submitted to the evaluations, and we try and integrate those into future programming. We also will be sending out a recording of today's webinar as well as the presentations. And we're going to be taking August off since it's a very heavy vacation month. We'll be coming back in September and throughout the rest of the calendar year with additional webinars, one focused on public health and fracking, and then also one on climate change and public health advocacy. So we look forward to seeing all of you there, and so appreciate the time that our presenters gave to us today, and also to all of you for spending your lunch hour with us. So I think with that, Peter, I will turn things back over to you to close us out.
Just thank you to everybody, and stay safe out there, and we'll see you all back in September.